Good evening. Sorry for the bit of a delay here. Let's share with you our screen. Can you see the?
No, we don't see anything. You're not sharing anything.
Share screen. Can you see the screen?
It's starting to come up. Yeah, now it's there.
Yeah, okay. Just now it should be okay. Sorry about technical delay. Right, we'll start the share right away, and perhaps be a little bit shorter because of the late hour. But let's start off with the first question which we have, and that is about slichas. And now let's go on to the next slide then. So we have slichas, which we say before Rosh Hashanah, and then we have slichas which we say during Yom Kippur. Now, there are basically two Ashkenazi forms of slichas. You have here slichas kaminig peilen, and then you have slichas kaminig liter reisen v'zamut. So we've got two forms of slichas. The Chabad slichas is largely based on the liter reisen v'zamut slichas, the Litvische rather than the Polish slichas. In this particular point, in the Polish slichas, it's much shorter. It's just, I think they have just Mashiach Tzidkecha. Whereas in the Litvische slichas, they have Mashiach Tzidkecha and Doniel and Ezra and Micha. So let's look at this, what we have on the page carefully. On the right side is the slichas of Chabad from before Rosh Hashanah. On the left side is the slichas from Yom Kippur by night. In the Litvische slichas, you'll see all of these and in the slichas before Rosh Hashanah. And so the question which someone asked me this past week was, why is it that in Chabad slichas we miss out Micho Avdecha? For those who don't remember, last year we had a discussion, why is there a switchover between Mashiach Tzidkecha and V'Dovid Avdecha? Because really they're saying exactly the same thing. Mashiach Tzidkecha says Yofshkir Yovin, David Avdecha says, and that's I mentioned last year from Rishonim, which explain why in Kippur by night we don't want to mention Mashiach and Tzidkecha for David. But let's now focus on the question which is put to us now about Micha. So the words of Micha are very, very significant in that they are presenting the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. As we all went to Tashlich on Rosh Hashanah, and we said those words from Micha. Mikel Kamoicha corresponds to the sphere of Kei, or the Midah of Kael, and Noisi Oven corresponds to Rachum, and so on. Sorry. So the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim are alluded to in those psukim of Micha, Mikel Kamoicha, and Yoshev Rachamenu, Titan Hashem Besel Yaakov, they are alluded to. And actually, in the Haftorah, which is today's Hayom Yom, in the Haftorah for Shabbos Shuvah, so the main part of is from another part of Etrei Osor, but then we also add those three psukim of the Yud Gimel Midas of Micha. As I said, Mikel Kamoicha, Yoshev Rachamenu, and etc. Here's actually added another pasuk. Right. In Likutei Torah it is explained that we've got two sets of Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. We have those which were said by Moshe Rabbeinu, or were given over by Moshe Rabbeinu, and then we have those which are by the Novi Micha. And in Likutei Torah, as everyone knows that you have the Inyan of Elul and Niladoidi is the Inyan of Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. And then we've got Naseh Tshuva, Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim. So it's explained in Chassidus that the Yud Gimel Midas of Micha are higher than Yud Gimel Midas of Moshe. Yud Gimel Midas of Moshe were kind of related to Elul, which is the time after the Chet HaEgel, and so there's Tshuva, and then there's Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim. It's in response to Tshuva. Yud Gimel Midas of Micha are from a higher level, higher than the Isarusa Dilatat in a sense. So if you could look in the Kutatera and Dvarim, the Elul Dika Memorim, Chofei Amid Beis, Lamed Dalad Amid Beis, Column Beis, more places. So it explains there the difference between the Yud Gimel Midas of Micha and Yud Gimel Midas of Torah Moshe, which will now explain then, this I haven't found anywhere, but this is my suggestion, that in Elul, we're not ready for the Yud Gimel Midas of Micha. Therefore, in Elul, we have Mashiach Tzidkicha, Doniel, Shchamudas. Micha doesn't get a mention here, the Yud Gimel Midas of Micha. It comes the night of Yom Kippur, so then you're talking about the higher level of Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim. That's when the extra piece, so in the Mitzvah Sheminig, they are saying before Rosh Hashanah, they're saying during Aseh Tshuva. So I guess they do not differentiate. But in the Chabad Minhag, that's what we have here. This difference that Micha is only mentioned during Aseh Tshuva, particularly Yom Kippur. I know you can ask why is Micha not mentioned in the Slichus for Shem Gedalia, and the answer is I don't know. Okay. Well, you can say here the Slichus for Shem Gedalia is similar to the Slichus for the rest of the preceding week. However, you go to learn Pshat. Let's move on. Now, something else which has been bothering me for years, and that is at the end of Musaf of Yomim Noiraim. So we have this piyut. It finishes off after Sim Sholem, Hayom Hazeh V'Yeinu Sosim Usmechim, and we finish off with the emphasis Hayom Hazeh, and then we finish off Va'atem Adveikim V'Hashem Alkeichem Chaim Kulchem Hayom. So there is a emphasis on the Indian of Hayom. Taking that word Hayoim, so then we have Hayoim Tamtzeinu, have a whole piyut with 7 stanzas, seven lines. So the first one is Aleph Tamtzeinu, the second one is a base of Archeinu, the third one is Tegadlenu, is a Gimel, and the fourth one is a Dalet. Now, in earlier Machzorim, as in hundreds of years ago, there's a full Aleph base. There is one of the most well-researched Machzorim. There was someone called Goldschmidt, I don't know his first name, and he did an enormous research on tefillah. So in the Machzor of Goldschmidt, you'll see he has, going back, from very earlier generations, hundreds of years ago, a whole Aleph base. But it's already hundreds of years that it's been shortened. As Goldschmidt says, the Poland, when you say these lines. So we're following the Velta Sheminig, he calls it Polish Sheminig, doesn't matter. And so we've got 7 lines. What's Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So we're talking about the Levush and how about the Gimel Midas Arachamim. Sorry, about Hayom Tamtzenu. I think we're back on again. Sorry about this. All right, back on again.
Now we got you stereo.
Yeah, okay. All right, sorry. So take it to the other room. Okay. Take it just to the other room. Okay. I'll just switch it off. Right. So we're talking about the Hayom Tamtzenu, and the Levush talks about this. And he says there's a maximum of 7. The Pasuk of Avatem Advekim Hashem Elokeichem Chaim Kol Cham Hayom had got 7 words, so that's why we have 7 stanzas. And then he says the following: that, listen carefully. On Yom Kippur, they would have a minhag to say Hayoim. Tishma Shavosenu. No, sorry, they would have another one, another one. Hayoim Tichtavenu L'chaim. On Yom Kippur, they would have Hayoim Tichtavenu L'chaim. So he says the minhag of Posen was when they added the extra line of Hayoim Tichtavenu L'chaim, they would take off the line of Hayoim Tishma Shavosenu, because you need to have just 7. All right, that's what the Levush writes. Again, we've got 7 stanzas, and on Yom Kippur they would say Hayom Tichtavenu L'chaim. On Rosh Hashanah they didn't say that, because only tzaddikim already are inscribed already from Rosh Hashanah L'chaim, and they didn't hold themselves as tzaddikim, and therefore on Rosh Hashanah they would say Hayom Tishma Shavosenu. And on Yom Kippur, they would say instead, Hayom Tichtavenu L'chaim. Okay, so far this is from the Levush. Now comes my theory. Possibly that because Tichtavenu is a chof, that comes before the kuf and the shiration and the tov. So the Tishma Shavosenu is there because Tichtavenu is there. And it's either one or the other. On Yom Rosh Hashanah, they would say Hayom Tishma Shavosenu, and Yom Kippur they would say Hayom Tichtavenu L'chaim, and therefore it is Al Seder Aleph based. If you looked at Tishma Shavosenu as instead of Hayom Tichtavenu L'chaim. Let's move on. I hope I can share with you the screen. No, host has disabled my screen. Okay, sharing the screen. Hopefully the host will let me in. And the next question which we have is about using a French press. French press is a kind of little kettle. Oh, there we are. It's a kind of little kettle where you put in coffee beans at the bottom here, and you pour in boiling hot water through the top, and then you push down this plunger somehow, and the comes up through this sieve, comes out just the coffee, and the beans stay in the bottom. And the person who asked me this was whether you can use it on Yom Tov, not about Shabbos, whether it's allowed to be used on Yom Tov. So I'm looking here, I've got a quote from Shmiras Shabbos Kilchosa, and he says you are allowed to pour boiling water onto tea leaves as the yarn tea strainer. Now, if you want to get a tea strainer today, perhaps you go to an antique shop, you might be able to find one. Now everyone uses tea bags, but those look like little sieves. So you are allowed to use those on Yom Tov. And there's no problem of Breda, possibly even Shabbos, but on Shabbos in any case, it's a problem of Bishul. And then he talks about also when you use a tea bag, you could have to pull it out. So basically, the dinim of boiler are not the same on Yom Tov as on Shabbos. On Shabbos, boiler is osur. on Yom Tov, if it's a simple way and it's the easiest way to get the things done, so then boiler is permitted, and so you are basically, I think you it's definitely okay that you are allowed to use this French press on Yom Tov. Okay. Next question which I have is, I happen to be in a shul where I was a little bit behind the minyan, so I started Shemon Esrei together with the Chazan. And Baruch Hashem, the Chazan wasn't in a very big rush, so I was able to keep up with the Chazan all the way through till Sim Shalom. And then I started thinking, should I say Sim Shalom with the Chazan? Should I say Birchas Koyanim? So the Chazan adds that paragraph with the Yevarecha Chayor Yisro. My question was, do I say that as I'm davening my quiet Shemon Esrei together with the Chazan? Do I say that piece? So I want to first bring to you a Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. This is Perek Daled, I think, of Rosh Hashanah. Say the brachas. I'm Ovis, Gevuras, Kedushas Hashem. That's the first three brachas. Ata Kodesh. Chol Malchus Imoyim Ve'inu Tekeh Kedushas Hayoyim. Then Zechrenes Shofres. Ve'oimer Avoida, which is what we call Ritzei. Ve'hoido, which is we call Moedim. U'Virchas Koyanim. He calls Sim Sholem. He calls Virchas Koyanim. And this is not the only place. You have in various places in Chazal where they refer to the brach of Sim Sholem, they refer to it as Birkas Kohanim. You can see also in one of the piyutim on Rosh Hashanah on Yom Kippur, Halel Chol B'Keil Rom Mikamocha. So you can see there he's referring to Sim Sholem as a Birkas Kohanim. I couldn't find it today. I remember somewhere in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch saying that that when you're davening b'yochid, it's not necessary to say Birchas Kohanim. But it doesn't seem to be totally wrong to say Birchas Kohanim, even in your quiet Shemon Esrei. Anyway, then here's the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan writes, V'im mispal b'shoveh im ha'shliach tzibur ad soifo. If you are, I use the word tandem, davening in tandem with the Chazan, so you say everything which the Chazan says. So then he asks, Yeshli Histapek, should you say Borcheinu v'abrocha hamshuleshes? Tainis says something about the not saying with the Chazan. If you are davening with the Neinu, we just suggest some motzitanis. We daven Shemon Esrei, we're interesting people. We call it Shemon Esrei. We have 19 brachas, and it comes on a Tainis. The Shemona Esrei consists of 20 brachas, the Chazan, because he says Aneinu and he finishes off Baruch Atah Hashem and so there's a 20th bracha. If for some reason someone today had been davening in tandem with the Chazan, then it does say in Poskim he shouldn't say Aneinu together with the Chazan, because the Chazan is meant to be saying an extra bracha, but he is a yochid, and he should say Aneinu in Shemei Tefillah. And he quotes this from the Maril, the Matei Moshe. Despite that, the last two lines he says, Borcheinu, Baruch HaMshulesh, is just a bakosha. It's not like a question of a bracha levatola, a bracha which you're not entitled to say. Borcheinu Baruch HaMshulesh is a bakosha. So the Aruch HaShulchan, he says you are allowed to say, so if you are davening in tandem with the Chazan, and you are up to Simsh and Birchas Kohanim, you can say Birchas Kohanim. I'm not talking about the Duchanim. I'm talking about more in the whole year round. You're allowed to say that together with the Chazan. I saw it's also the Kamarne in Shulchan HaTorah says the same thing. And all right.
When you're davening in tandem with the Chazan, do you say also Nagdishach in Kedusha?
Someone asked me this last week. When you are given psicha, you may sometimes be tempted to put your siddur inside the Aron Kodesh whilst you're waiting to say B'rich Shmei, or you're saying B'rich Shmei. So is it okay to put a siddur inside the Aron Kodesh? Unfortunately, we don't have Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Beis HaKnesses. So in Siman Kuf Nun Daled, in Mishnah Brura, he brings the following. Isa b'sefer Chasidim, Siman Tov Tov Kuf Lamed Hey. The also lahaniach betoich Aron HaKodesh Yeriyos Psulim. If you have sheets of the Sefer Torah which became disqualified and they had to replace them, what do you do with those discarded, if that's the right word, sheets of the Sefer Torah? So those sheets, he says, you mustn't put them in the Aron Kodesh. Because a loose sheet from a whole Sefer Torah does not have the same kedusha as a Sefer Torah. So you're placing something less sacred in the Aron Kodesh, which is not okay. Then he quotes, if this is the understanding that when an Aron Kodesh is consecrated, it is that such sacred articles like single sheets of the Sefer Torah will also be kept there. So then if that was the understanding by the consecration, so then it remains accepted. That it is customary to place faulty sheets of the parchment of the Sefer Torah to put them in the Aron Kodesh. Aval chumshim or shor svarim yesh li zoh shelo lahaniach betoiche afilu lefisho. But a chumash, the chori means a chumash made in a scroll, be that as may, but a regular chumash, a printed chumash for sure, or other svarim. One should be careful not to put it in the Aron Kodesh even momentarily. Whether the Sefer Torah is inside or not inside, it says one shouldn't put other svarim of lesser kedusha in the Aron Kodesh. The Aron Kodesh is designated, is dedicated for the Sefer Torah, and one shouldn't put other svarim in the Aron Kodesh. Of course, there are questions: what happens to on Aron Kodesh, which is now obsolete? That they've replaced it with a new one. What do you do with the old one? That's another discussion. There's also a discussion about the minig of Son Kehilas on Simchas Torah, when they take out all the Sefer Torah, about putting a candle inside. There are places which have that minig. Others object to that because the candle doesn't have kedusha, and you don't have the right to put that candle into the Aron Kodesh. The others will argue you're putting it there somehow to represent or whatever it may be. So these are the discussions. But the chayre, one should not be putting one's siddur in the Aron Kodesh even momentarily. Let's move on. All right. So I told you last week, I was Shabbos, following Shabbos of Slichus. I was in Haditch, and I went over to Bench Gomel. So the Gabba says, no, I'm going to give you maftir. No? Okay. I have to listen to the Gabba. Yeah. You go to the shul, you have to listen to the Gabba. So now I go. So then he called me up for maftir, and then I hadn't Bench Gomel. So after the second bracha, just before Hagbeh, I said Birchas HaGomel, before saying the Haftarah. Afterwards, in Geman, a visitor, also I was a visitor, he was a visitor, he's from Florida. He came over to me and he says that he has a strong tradition for me in his family that one is very careful not to make a hefsek between the two brachas of the Aliyah and the 5 brachas of Maftir. There are 7 brachas in all. So you got the 2 brachas before and after the Aliyah LeTorah, and then you got the brachas, 1 bracha before the Haftarah and 4 after. So in all you got 7 brachas. And he had been taught very strong emphasis not to interrupt between them, even with the Mishaberach and things like that, which I must say, what I've seen is people do, or the Gaboim do make a Mishaberach after the Aliyah, before the Haftarah is begun, before the Hagbeh even. But anyway, he said he remembers something about the Alter Rebbe when he came out. I said, I think you're mixing up, and I want to share with you. This is the story which he triggered my memory, and that is, this is Yud Shvat Tov Shin Chof Gimel. Now, as you know, the Rebbe observed Yortzeit on Yud Shvat. He would daven at the Yomid because it's the Yortzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And what happened that morning? So the Rebbe had, I guess, the 3rd Aliyah, and the Rebbe was going about to say Kaddish. And a young man who just come from Eretz Yisrael And so he jumped in and he said Birchas HaGoimel between the end of Shlishi, and a weekday, between the end of Shlishi and Kaddish, he interjected with HaGoimel. And so in the next Farbrengen, the Rebbe explained how one shouldn't do that. One should not interrupt with HaGoimel between the last Aliyah and the Kaddish. HaGoimel should be said after the Kaddish. But meanwhile, the Rebbe told the following. When the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was arrested in 1927, when he came back from Kostroma to Leningrad, so he benched Goimel. Because why didn't he mention Goimel in Kostroma? Because you have to wait till you come back to Yachzer Leburia. You have to come back to your state of health. So he would not make Birchas HaGoimel until he actually came back to his home in Petersburg. Now the Seder was that the Rebbe would have maftir, as we saw by our Rebbe. And so then the Rabbonim started discussing what should we do as far as the Rebbe's Birchas HaGoimel. The Seder is that the one who has Birchas HaGoimel, he has first an Aliyah, and then after he has said the Birchas HaTorah, after the end of his Aliyah, then he says Birchas HaGoimel. But here the Rebbe is going to have maftir. And right after the Aliyah, one has to start with the Haftorah and the Brachas. And the Birchas Haftorah are affiliated to the Birchas Haftorah are affiliated to the Birchas HaTorah. And this is mentioned about they amount to a specific number. Mispeh Mesuma mentioned about the 7. So then there was a whole discussion of various svaras, various opinions. One svara was perhaps the Rebbe should be given not maftir but shlishi, and this would be very comfortable for the Rabbonim. Won't have to break their heads to work out a halacha in Orach Chaim, because this is mamash yisurim gdolim to work out the shaila in Orach Chaim. Especially you have to start even looking at achronim. But then, after this svara of changing the Rebbe's aliyah to shlishi rather than maftir was nishlul b'tachlus, or totally rejected, and it was evident that the Rebbe is going to have maftir. So there were 3 svaras. One svara was the Rebbe should say Birchas HaGoimel before he has the aliyah, before the Birchas HaTorah, the first bracha of Birchas HaTorah. The other one was to say Birchas HaGoimel after the maftir, before Haftarah, I guess. And the third one was to say Birchas HaGoimel. No, sorry. The second svara was to say And so the Rebbe says he doesn't remember what was actually the conclusion. He's just saying, and it follows on about what happened then, about saying the Birchas HaGoimel before the Kaddish. So the Rebbe's left it open. There's 3 svaras, and the simplest thing would have been to say Birchas. You don't have to have an aliyah to say Birchas HaGoimel. You can say aliyah. Rebbe is one thing. He has to come over to the bima as Hagan Satircha. But like this, I could have gone up to the Sefer Torah. I said Birchas HaGoimel earlier, and then just said Maftir and Haftarah without any problem. Yeah. In the notes, they do refer to Chikri Minhagim of Rabbi Gorari, where he has a long discussion about this, and he brings actually some Svardish poskim who said that they should say the Birchas Hagoimel after Haftorah, all the way at the end. All right, let's move on. Okay, someone asked me this past week about using putting on a badge, a brooch, on a garment on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So let's explain something. We have an issue of sewing, of toifer. Now in English we have a word stitch. What does the word stitch mean exactly? To explain to you my question a bit clearer, is stitch one prick or two pricks? What exactly is a stitch? Is a stitch one prick or two pricks? So my understanding is that a prick, like you have when a person has a pain in their chest, that's called a stitch. In Yiddish, the word for stitch is a shtoch, to prick through. And so to prick something in and out, that is a form of sewing. So that's called shtei tchivas. When you take it, so in the good old days when we used to have these terry nappies, so how you normally in the weekday you'd bring the nappy in the right position, and you'd put the prick in and prick it out, and then you'd close the safety pin. But on Shabbos, instead of going through the safety pin in and out the same cloth twice, you'd stick it through the two pieces of fabric, and then you would clasp it over the two fat pieces, because sticking a safety pin in and out on the same piece of cloth, and certainly if it's joining two pieces of cloth, becomes a question of toifer, although it's one of temporary nature. Here we have but I wanted to see a contemporary sefer. This is from Rav Forkash's latest volume of Shabbos Halacha, Chelik Dalet, which was published, I think, last year. And he writes the following: that which we'll be discussing here about using safety pins is when he's talking about connecting two parts of a garment by means of a pin. But to stick in a brooch, sikat tachshit, or let's say a motzetz, a dummy, a pacifier for a child to have a pacifier hanging from his thing. So he says that doesn't fall into the gather of toifer. It's mutar l'chol hadayas. So he's saying that to stick on a brooch is not a problem of toifer. I didn't really read through his whole lomdus. A little bit I did, but I didn't grasp how clearly why. But he takes very clearly this approach that putting on a brooch is not a problem of toifer. Putting on a badge is not a problem of toifer. The problem of toifer is when you are taking two pieces of cloth and joining them together by means of a safety pin. You can see what I said before about the one prick is tkifa achas, and to go in and out, that's called shtei tkifas, which is the minimum of a malacha. Okay, let's move on to our next point, which I wanted to discuss, and that is number 8, about keren hashvius or agudas hashmita. And it's very confusing what's going on here. That's why we're here to clarify things. Yeah, we all understand that the farmers in Eretz Yisrael who are not working for a year are financially compromised, if that's the right word, and there's a need to help them, to help them financially, and for this there's been established a keren hashvius, a keren hashmita, going back 50 years ago, perhaps more. I don't know exactly how long. You can see in the Jewish newspapers big ads of the farmers. Let's help the farmers. Wonderful. There's thousands of farmers, Baruch Hashem, who are keeping Shemitah. Gewaldige Sache. It's a big nisoyon, and there's this keren which helps them. I remember years ago, about 20 years ago approximately, I saw one of the leaflets, the flyers, where they had all the letters from the various Gedolei Yisrael, and they had from the Rebbe, instead of a letter, they had a big check. Everyone else was giving big letters. The Rebbe gave him a big check, about $70 or dollars or whatever it may be. So the Rebbe did encourage to support the Keren HaShmita. There's something else called Agudas Hashmita, and that is that they are selling you a piece of land in Eretz Israel. So you're sitting comfortably in Stamford Hill or wherever you are in some other parts of this fair island, and you want to have observed Shemitah. So you pay $20, $70, whatever it may be, and you get a document, and you have a title, ownership to a plot of land, dal damis, a square meter, whatever it may be, and now you are owning this, and it won't be used on Shemitah. So now the problem here is, do the farmers get anything out of this whole promotion? Apparently not. Apparently not. And I actually spoke to a Rov of Lubavitch in Eretz Yisrael today, and he says that he understands that the farmers do get paid for their land which is not being used. But I wasn't confident. I called up. I made this Agudas Hashmita. I spoke to someone in Ivrit this afternoon, and he says no. Their money which they get is just that you should. It's for how do you say, operating costs. So it's very, very confusing, because people think that they're going to buy this plot of land in Eretz Yisrael and they're going to be benefiting the Giborei Chayei Chesed Dvorei, and it's not true. And so it's you want to buy a chelik in an Egla Arufa somewhere, you want to buy in a Petach Hamer, you want to buy a chelik in a Shiloh Hakan, you can buy a chelik in Shemitah also, you can do that. But it's misleading that this Agudas Hashmita, which people are confusing with the Keren Hashvias, apparently not a penny is going to the farmers. It's processing costs. I asked, do you sell it back? Will you buy it back from me at the end of the year? No, the money is used up in processing costs. So I'm sure there are fine Yidden who are making chasnas. I just want to make this clear that these are two separate things. And if you want to support the Giborei Chayei Chesed Dvorei, so there's Keren Hashvias. There may be other funds also, but the ones which are selling you plots of land, if they don't say that they're giving to the farmers, then the answer is they're not. Okay. Let's move on. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we had last week, Taka was talking about the difference between Hema Koruv and Afolu and Hema Koshluv and Afolu. And so someone, Rebbe Zirkin, actually sent me this, that if you look in Medrash Tehillim is also sometimes known as Medrash Shocher Tov, because it's a Medrash on the three Iyov Mishlin Tehillim. It starts off with the word Shocher Tov, and so it's Medrash Tehillim or Medrash Shocher Tov, it's the same thing. And at the beginning of this Perek of Chazayin in Tehillim talks about this B'kroi V'olai Mereim, that they were closing in on me. So he says this is referring to a Paroi, or Paroi Hikriv. The B'kroi V'olai Mereim is Paroi Hikriv, where he was closing on the Bnei Yisrael. He said Erdoif Asik, etc. And then Sorai V'oi V'ili Heima Koshlu V'nafolu. What happened here was that Paroi, when he was chasing the Yidden and they came to the Yamsuf, so their council was confused. They saw this miraculous splitting of the sea, and so they marched straight in without realizing that this is going to be their downfall. And so that's the Hema Koshlu V'nafolu, that they misassessed the situation, and they were drowned in the Yamsuf. Okay, we've got one last thing, and that is I wanted to discuss about Kisei Hadam. If you have the good opportunity to be able to do Kaporas, especially Erev Yom Kippur, and the Kisei Hadam is a mitzvah which most of us townsfolk don't have a chance to do throughout the year. And so really the mitzvah of Kisei Hadam is not our mitzvah, it's the mitzvah of the Shoichet. But the Shoichet is generous, and he allows the Anoshim Nichbodim to do Kisei Hadam. But it's something which you don't know very much about, and it's important to know a little bit of the halachas. So what we're seeing here is that Kisei Hadam, so I'm going to 3 points about Kisei Hadam. Number one, it has to be be'ofor, it has to be with loose dust. And we had a bit of a problem a couple of years ago that we didn't manage to get sawdust, which is kosher for Kisei Adam. So we got some sand. Now the sand was built of sand, but it was a little bit moist. And if it's moist, if you hold it in your hand, it does not fall through your fingers. It's moist, it holds it together. Very dry sand will fall through your fingers. But if it's a bit moist, it doesn't fall through your fingers. And you look in Shulchan Aruch, it's not okay. It has to be so loose that it's offer. It has to be offer hamispazer. It can, how do you say, scatter by itself. So that's you. And when you do Kisei Adam, you first have to designate, put some offer loose earth or loose dirt on beneath, and then the dam of the bird is on that loose earth, and then you cover with loose offer on top. So that's number one. Number two is that Kisei Hadam is only applied into Dam HaNefesh. You can see it. Dam HaNefesh means that's that part of the blood which is where the life of the chicken expires. That is where the mitzvah is done. So it can be dam perhaps earlier or later, other dam, and that's not Dam HaNefesh. So you have later, can be in the Beis HaShchita, can be somewhere else, a bit of blood on the floor. If you are covering that blood, it could be a bracha levatala. It's not Dam HaNefesh. It's blood. It's Dam Hoivorim. By the Shchita, the Mokim HaShchita, as soon as they do the Shchita, so of course that is that blood which comes out then, that's the Dam HaNefesh. The third point is that you're not mechuyev to cover every drop of the blood. You see, ein socher chlachasas dam afilu mashahu dai. So listen what happens. At 7:05 came along Reuven and he scattered some dust. At 7:07 comes along Shimon. Oh, he also starts covering. It could be that the blood which the blood of the chicken which Shimon is covering, part of that blood has already been covered by Reuven. So if you are covering blood, which part of that, that shchita has already been covered by someone else, and you make a bracha and covering another part of it, it's a bracha levatala. Once part of the blood of that chicken has been covered, any more covering is not a mitzvah, and if you make a bracha on that, it will be a bracha bracha levatala, because it's not mekayim the mitzvah. So therefore, before endeavoring to do Kisei Adam, make sure that it's there's no other loose, no one else has covered part of that dam, and the shaycha tells you that you're doing the right thing, so then you can do. I saw then I think in the Matei Ephraim about saying Shechianu, doing Kisei Adam. It's actually not so poshut, because Kisei Hadam is not a mitzvah bo mizman. Esrig is Arba Minim is mitzvah bo mizman. It's got to do with time. I remember when the Rebbe had a discussion when a girl, the first time she benches licht, does she make a bracha shechiyonu on benching licht? Could be the same thing for in the Welt. If a woman gets married, and the first time she's benching licht, does she say a shechiyonu on the benching licht? If the first time I put on a talis, I got married, the first time I put on a talis, to make a bracha shechiyonu for the first time wearing a talis. These mitzvahs, if the first time, if I would bake challah, I would bake challah, mimafresh challah, I've never done in my life. So do I make a shechiyonu the first time I do a mitzvah, but it's not time linked. So this is a machlokas aposkim, and the Matei Ephraim seems to be taking the view that you would say shechiyanu. The Rebbe was cautious about this, and he didn't want to say that a girl should say shechiyanu the first time she lights Shabbos candles. And he said, you know what? Let her. It was right near Yom Tov. Let her light the first time will be on Yom Tov. She'll make shechiyanu for the Yom Tov in any case. Or if it's another time of the year, buy her a new garment, the Beged Chodesh, and this way you'll solve the problem of shechiyanu. If you want to look up, I think it's in Simuchov base in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in Erechaim, where he talks about this question, whether you say Shechianu on mitzvah, which is not a mitzvah bomis man, it's man. And the Chayla, we would try to find another eitzim, not to rely on that alone. No, it's Erev Yom Kippur. Yeah, I have to ask Mechila. I apologize for the malfunctioning of the Zoom tonight. It's a little bit beyond my control, but if I offended anyone or anyone, it's better Mechila. And if someone can explain to me the Lashon, the Rebbe would say Chsime und Gmach Chsime Tova. I'll be grateful to hear what's the pshat of the double Lashon. But meanwhile, Chsime und Gmach Chsime Tova for all the Yidden b'chol makom shehem, including everyone who's present this evening. Kol tov.
Thank you. Gmach Chsime Tova.
Samuel, what was the point of mention?